There's this concept people have about the power of the mind. The power of everything's in your thinking, create with your mind. All those kinds of books and videos and all about the power of the mind. Which mind are we talking about? There's God's divine mind, there's my soul mind, and there's my human mind, which manifests as a human brain that we think thinks. And it actually doesn't. It just kind of carries out the orders of the human mind, which in a sense follows the dictates of the soul mind. And the soul mind is where the chooser is, and it chooses to follow God's mind or not. Jesus says, once upon a time, a great philosopher, his name was Descartes, René Descartes, if I remember correctly. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." That's so cool. See, this is one of those dumb things spiritual people say. I think, therefore I am. It sounds brilliant, but it isn't. So Jesus says, when Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am," he should have said, "I think, therefore I am not." Because the thinker that thinks he's thinking isn't doing anything. You're non-existent when you think you can think without God. We think that we have free will to be without God, but if God is all there is, how can you be outside of God? So what happens is, I only truly think when I am in my divine mind thinking with God. Not being told what to think by God, but choosing to think love like God does. Now I'm truly thinking. I'm truly using my mind. But humans believe we're separate from God or separated from God, and then God, I feel so empty or separated. I better start thinking about how to get my life together. And there's kind of negative thinking and positive thinking. So people say, you need to get into positive thinking. But if you just heard me, I said even that came after we thought we separated. So even positive thinking is a ploy. It's a thing that we've come up with. It's better than negative thinking. It cannot save you because it's still coming from the person who's messed up and thinks they're separate from God. Better than nothing, but see the difference? So that's why Jesus was saying, correcting seemingly Descartes, I think, therefore I am not. Because when it's the little I, the ego I, I'm actually not truly thinking. I'm conjuring. You see, I'm making believe. I'm not creating, I'm making believe. And there's a theory within science that says, they've come to understand, it's a funny thing, almost everything that they believe in science, they've come up with this belief that it just seems that most of the theories that they set out are the things that they end up proving as true. Why is that? Because we're the co-creators here, making everything happen the way we want it to happen. Once we prove it, we're actually proving what we already believe. That's why we can say, instead of, I'll believe it when I see it. No, you actually see it because you believe it. So we'll get to the believe it in just a second. But it's a funny thing because people are going positive thinking, negative thinking, think positively, use your mind to create. I get that. There's a value in it because it's a little bit better looking than negative thinking. But it still comes from the broken self. Believe it or not, the human ego, the part of us that does not want to know love or God, that part of us is fine with positive thinking as long as it boosts your ego more. The average person can say, I'm having negative thinking. That must be my ego, so I'll stop. I'm going to use positive thinking. And the ego's going, great. Because you still think it's you. You see what I'm saying? It's a false spirituality. And I know it's hard for me to even talk about those kinds of things because what's left? Thank you, Michael, for the spiritual teachings that stripped away the very last vestiges we had of anything to believe in on planet Earth. Yeah, sorry, man. But, I have the same problem. The same thing. I have to deal with the same thing that The things that are negative are of the ego, and the things we think are positive are still potentially of the ego. Back to God. It's the only sanity. Back to God is the only sane answer. That's why we're titling today something along the lines of positive thinking versus prayer. Now, I'll explain this, I guess, in a few different ways because it kind of comes to me quickly. But we're part of God. Even prayer means I'm over here and God's somewhere else. But prayer is a good thing. Below prayer is positive thinking. Below prayer. Positive thinkers think prayer is old school. Positive thinking is new school. And see how the mannerism of that? Oh, you still pray. Oh, poor thing. We use positive thinking. We don't have to ask God. We make it happen. Yes, you did. This entirely screwed up universe where everything dies. Thank you. Thank you for your look at me with my positive thinking. And then we pray when something goes wrong. I'm using positive thinking to create a new car or a new partnership or whatever, and then, our new partner takes off with our new car. Then, because we used positive thinking, then we're praying, back to prayer because now we're broken. Oh, dear God. And God's on the other side. Oh, Mr. Positive Thinking. Where's your positive thinking now? Bring back the car and the partner, preferably both or whatever, And that's not how this works. Prayer is above. Because prayer means I'm willing to let go of the I that thought it could think. The I that I thought could make something happen. The prayer begins with, my bad. That's how the prayer should start. Because that's essentially what you're doing when you humble yourself to prayer. It means, I of my little self am nothing, and I'm looking for something more. All right, so on that note, if we use this concept, just let me paint a picture for a second. There's God, then the sparks jumped off of the fire, and the sparks still existed in the fire, but the sparks also can jump from the fire. The sparks leap from the fire, and those little sparks are our soul. You have one, and I have one, and we all leapt from the great fire of God, the cosmic fire of God. Now, those sparks, though, have consciousness. And when they thought they separated from God, they created a world to jump into. If you look at a fire, pop, goes a spark into the blackness of the night. And then it looks like it fades out, but it jumps off into the blackness of night. So we created a world where there's other things to land on when we've jumped. Even the air we've jumped into, we co-created that other world. Instead of just the fire of God, we created an other world. So that's where the soul came into manifestation, when we seemingly separated. Before that, you're not a soul living in God. You're part of Spirit, capital S, itself. So there's, I am one with God. That's spirit. That's not a soul. Soul came into existence when we think we divided into becoming individuals. How can we be individuals as one? So when separation took place, we individuated, the same as a child does from its parent or mother. It starts to individuate over time. That's just a replay of us in our separation from God. So we're safely in the womb of God. The spark happens, we separate, and we, being intelligent, cosmically intelligent and creative, more than humans could ever understand. When we think we've created a new something or other, a new washer machine that washes more efficiently. Ooh, no, we created the entire universe together. It's so big, it's hard for us to even come close to understanding it. All the complexities of biology. I've heard people say, there has to be a God. Really? Why do you say that? I'm a scientist, and I believe there has to be a God, because something intelligent created that biology, cosmology, all the movements of stars. I mean, it's too vast, it's too amazing. So even skeptics or atheists to be agnostic. They say at some point, there has to be because look at it all. Now take that and imagine, we created all that complexity. We like to say, well, it's either science that did it, or it's, like nature, or it's God, because it's too amazing. So then that means, once again, we're pushing our power outside. We created this vast, bizarro, multi-leveled, multi-dimensional experience. We co-created that. God within us gave us the power generally to do so, but we did it. God didn't say, I want a this and a that, in historically speaking. God never said, I want a fly and I want a spider, and one will eat the other. And we go, nature is so amazing. There has to be a God. Because look at nature. Do you know what you just said when you said that? Another thing, dumb things spiritual people say, oh, nature's so amazing, it's got to be a God. Look at nature. That means you're saying that God could say, wait a second, into my web, great, and devour it. God cannot do that. God is actually only love. Love cannot devour, kill, die, or be taken from. It's this state of bliss, and we've forgotten that. So if this isn't making sense at all, or barely, just at least breathe at the idea, breathe in the idea. We co-created it all. All right? Now, there's this vast consciousness that was God. I say was because historically we're sort of describing it as a linear story. Once upon a time, the sparks jumped off. So here comes the soul. The soul, the individual soul, and us collective soul created the universe. But then, from there, we continued to create now, not just as a soul. We created a thinking self, an emotional self, and a physical self, and a physical world for that physical self to live in. Is that making sense? We created, you enjoying this? We created not just the soul, we created a intellectual self and an intellectual world to live in. Does that make sense? An emotional self and an emotional world for the emotional self to live in. And a physical self for the physical self to have a place to live. We did all that. Now, there are people that don't like the world and they use physical means to try to fix it. I'm getting older, but maybe if I go to the gym and do something, okay, I'll be able to fix it. You're trying to use a physical self to fix a physical thing, right? There's emotional things we try to use to fix an emotional world, emotional counseling and so on, psychotherapy, whatever else, And then there's intellectual things we use. I'm counting backwards. Does that make sense? Intellectual things we use. But if you're not seeing this yet, here's what you're dealing with. When I said God and then a soul and an intellectual self, all I'm actually talking about is actually found within you. The God is up here in the upper three chakras. The soul is the heart chakra. The intellectual self, the next chakra. The emotional self, the next chakra. The physical self, the next chakra. All the things I just described are actually within us, each of us. Each of those chakras, each of those states of consciousness are within us. Okay? And each is trying to use itself to fix its own little environment. So when you say, I have positive thinking is from the intellectual self level. We use NLP, hypnotherapy, positive thinking. All of those are still somehow related to the fire chakra, let's call it. With the neurons, the fire, the nervous system. It's all about positive charges, negative charges on the amino acids and the proteins and all this. It's still thinking. It's still the thinking self. Higher than that chakra is the heart, where we enter for prayer, which is the next chakra up. So the higher mind enters into prayer to change our world. Where the other self, oh, you still do prayer? Watch this, tap, 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 technique. There's guys that are speaking to 10,000 people in audiences, every month somewhere. What you need are my techniques. Watch this. Just a minute ago I was bummed. Now I'm not. Look, see, I proved it with a muscle test. They have techniques and systems and electrodes and, here's an electrode, here's a lie detector test. We brought out to show you the technology of changing your life by changing your mind. Okay, we put it on. Okay, I'm thinking about my ex. You know, the meter goes crazy. Now watch this. You know, technique, whatever. You know, some sort of technique. And then retest it and it's... I'm all leveled off. See that? And all I did was, people like, what was that technique again? For $99.95, I'll show you that technique, level 1. Now, if you want to know how to change not just that sort of issue, not only can you heal the past with this, that, and the other technique, there are techniques to do things new. There's a special technique specifically for cars, creating new cars. Because you have to, we found this in science, this has now been proven, that we have to, access specific parts of the brain and neurons. And to do that, you've got to make sure your pinky's out while you're doing that other technique. And they prove it with muscle testing and manifesting cars. Guys, all we're doing is manifesting things to prove what we already believed. And it looks like you discovered something new. And all you did was prove something. But you just proved your own thoughts. They're called self-fulfilling prophecies. See? Makes sense? And we think that it's so impressive. It's amazing because it's the ego self being stroked. Look at what I've done. Aren't I amazing? But it's still techniques of the lower realm. A new pill that will fix your body because you're ill. That's the physical trying to match the physical, fix the physical. Sometimes it's the intellectual trying to fix the physical. And I'm okay saying that some of these things of the lower chakras, of our human selves, I'm okay that some of that fits. I'm saying don't deify it. But it's okay that you use, like for example, only spiritually can we fix things, really, because we're spirits. The intellect cannot fix things per se. Einstein tried to explain that. You can't fix things with the same mind that created them. However, it's also true that although this body is an illusion, my emotional self, my intellectual self, what's nice is that I can reach out and hug a person and it can help heal. But is it because hugging is a technique that we don't need God? My own hugs are so amazing, especially if I'm doing my special NLP technique while I hug you, which probably looks a little weird and distracting, but I'm doing all my special techniques and, whatever it happens to be. And then I hug you and you go, oh, I felt healed by that. I think that's fine. But if we didn't bring God into it, God wasn't into it. Someone's got to choose to bring God into it. A chooser. The chooser is what makes something happen. The chooser. So if you don't call in God, unfortunately, the default program is the ego. The ego was given, when we separated, it was given autonomy. It was given power of attorney to make all our decisions for us. You may not like it, but it happened. Ego was given automatic pilot on these things, power of attorney, unless we choose to call God into the moment. And that's part of what I'm getting to here. The idea, the chakras again, the physical, working physical things, the emotional, trying to fix emotional things, the intellect trying to fix intellectual things, but the heart says goodbye to all that, or we'll get back to you on that. I say that because I go to the heart and watch what the heart does. I don't know. Instead of, I got it. One more technique, one more theory, one more. It just goes, I don't know, God, show me. And now look what happens when my heart extends saying, I don't know. Look, where are the other chakras? Where's God? These upper three chakras, the throat, third eye, and crown. So then God, like if you've ever seen a tarot card or in the Catholic Mass, the symbol of the host, the bread, the host descending into the chalice when they dip it into the wine represents, this is my consciousness. That cup, that chalice represents my consciousness, filled with the blood of God, meaning the essence of God. Here comes the host, and it's a symbol of the Holy Spirit. If you look at the tarot card, it shows it coming down. It's like the Holy Spirit descending into my being. Well, that bread, that presence of God, the light, light descending down as the host, the circle, the orb, it's like God. It's descending down into the chalice, which is me saying, here I am. So I'm going to be fed by God. But that God isn't actually somewhere out there, Mars or whatever, out there. It's right here in my own being. I'm not saying I of myself am God. I'm saying, when I even say that, I of myself am nothing. But when I say that and open my arms, God then becomes present in my being. So we say descends in us, but it doesn't mean from outer space to me. It actually means I open a portal within my own higher self for God to be present, which is already there, but I don't see it unless I open that. And then it descends into my being. So prayer is, instead of me in the lower three chakras, the human chakras, I rise to my heart and open my heart, open my arms, and welcome the upper three chakras, the God presence, to descend into my being. That's why prayer works and is a different power. It's supernatural. That's why people of the other three chakras will try to figure out how that happened. We had our theories and it was all working, but this one time I did my special boom shakalaka technique and it didn't work. You know what we need? Another technique. And someone will come up with one and they'll go, this is a better technique than the last technique. Reiki is better than that, therapeutic touch. And then there's something else better than Reiki. There's still techniques. Do Reiki without God and it's still just an act. Do any kind of healing, any kind of anything. Even visualizations. Oh no, visualizations are automatically God. No, they're not. Meditation isn't guaranteed to be God, believe it or not. There are people that sit around, oh, I'm meditating. Wow, what are you doing in your meditation? I was visualizing walking along a stream. And then I sat on a rock and the tree spoke to me. That's still visualization. It's just cute. That's all it is. It's neat. You feeling more relaxed? Yes, that's all you did. It's called a relaxation technique or a visualization technique. If you didn't ask the tree to be an embodiment of God, God was not in your meditation. And if God is not in your meditation, it's not called meditation. But those are some of the dumb things spiritual people do and say. I'm meditating. You're not if God isn't part of the story. You don't say, I'm drinking water, but your cup is empty. Well, I know, but it's kind of cool. I'm drinking water. Your cup is empty. You're not drinking water. You're pretending to drink water. If there's no water in the cup, you're not drinking water. If there's no meditation, God in the meditation, it's not meditation. It's just an act. So we have our fancy way of doing all these things. And it's incredible because there's new things coming out, new sciences, new astronomy, new astrology or whatever, new biology, new medicine, because it's all part of a new age. New finances, which has to do with more prosperity. But there's two ways to do the new. The new that's still being conjured up by you and me, or the new that is coming from God. So new biology without God is still human, new, and not spiritual. Supernatural has to come from something that is beyond nature, beyond human. Or it isn't supernatural. And if it's not supernatural, it's not miraculous. It's got to have another source, a source higher than the problem itself. Just because you can come up with a clever way to fix the world with worldly things doesn't mean you've gotten in touch with God. And I'm not trying to sound religious when I say without God, it's not happening. It's not real. That sounds real religious, maybe fundamental Christian almost, but it's just the truth. God is the only thing beyond nature, human nature. Human nature we created. The heart soul is the bridge between one from the other. But God is the only thing supernatural. So if you want something miraculous to change your life in some way, then you have to access God. I'm not dissing the stuff of human, just say it what it is. I'm going to do some prayer and meditation to help release this headache. I'll do that with God in just a few minutes, but right now, my headache's a little severe. So go ahead and take the aspirin to help ease the pain. That's okay. But don't think the aspirin is God. Don't think it actually cures anything. It's just part of the game. Does that make sense, guys? It's just part of the game. That's why I say know the truth, but respect the illusion. It means the same as play the game. But know you're the game master. But play the game. All right? So on this human level, they're coming up with things constantly. In the new biologies, they're going, what, there are theories out here now, and ideas that are being, quote unquote, proven that, once upon a time, just not too long ago, we know how things are working. We know how things work. Therefore, we know how to fix them. So in new sciences and new biologies, they go, the way to fix your prosperity level, positive thinking. No, the positive thinking is still the thinking world, not the prayer world. You'll get further with your prosperity stuff, working on it two ways. The forgiveness of anything that's in your way, making you have an experience, a limited life financially. Heal your limited belief systems. Oh, you mean with a technique? No, that counters them on a human level. Heal them through forgiveness. That's one tool for prosperity. The other one's called tithing or giving. Because if you really want to develop prosperity, you start to realize, what I give, I receive. As I give, my mind starts opening up to more, and that's how the trick, let's call it, to greater prosperity. The rest are just techniques. If it doesn't have God, like the forgiveness, and if it doesn't have God, like the idea that as I give, I receive, because that's the God principle, then you're still not doing it with a real technique. Or the new biologies. We have techniques, we say, in the new biologies, okay, wow, they're understanding. We used to think that the genes control everything, and the genes are part of this nucleus, and the nucleus is part of this, and that, and they tie this all together, and they go, wow, so we're controlled. If the genes are made up of your family, then that means you're just living a destiny constantly. This will happen here. This will happen here. If you're fated to disease because it's in the genes, you're going to get the disease. If you're fated to be white or black or tall or short, it's just fated. And then they realized genes have emotions too, the emotional component. It tells you that you lean towards depression or whatever. In science says, ha, see? There's no God. It's all chemistry. Except they realized you can destroy the nucleus, you can destroy the root of a cell and it still didn't die. Then they realized that means the brain of a cell isn't the core of the cell. So they're saying, so now they're missing something and they're scrambling to figure it out. They could have asked me, I would have made the journey shorter, but seriously, they thought the brain did it. And that means, in analogy, my brain controls my body and the brain of a cell controls the cell. The brain being, they think at one point, they thought maybe the genes. So the genes control and my brain controls, which makes sense and can be proven scientifically, except they're realizing that's not the way it works. They can destroy those parts of a cell and it still continues to live for quite some time, which means even this brain isn't in control like I thought. Notice how the brain is way up at the top of the body, where our upper chakras are. Notice how it tried to make itself God by putting itself up here. The thinker is the one in control. No, the brain is actually connected to the second greatest complex of nerves in the body, which is your solar plexus. So technically, and that's the fire chakra, and that's also your mental chakra, lower mind. Meaning, this is an illusion that my brain's up here. It belongs here, chronologically speaking. My brain should not put itself up on the hill. It's like in Washington, D.C., they were putting together, where you have your legal aspect of of politics, you've got your Senate, you've got your presidential, you got these three aspects of politics. And it ended up being where, when they were laying it out, you would think the president, when they laid it out, sacred geometry and all that, the president's place should have been maybe the highest ground based on its description, the president. It ended up being the legal part of our systems, political systems, ended up with the highest geology, ground. Geography, the ground. And that tells you where you're going. Laws are going to run everything instead of an inspired person, which is what a president should have been. I'm just saying. I'm not picking on anybody in particular. I'm just saying. All right. So think of it like that. The brain put itself up in the highest spot, the highest position. It wasn't supposed to be. Now, but yet we co-created this, and everything we see in creation, we should look at it and say, what does this mean? Look at the symbolism. As soon as you put the brain at the top, it means the thinker's in charge. We should blush and go, oops, what were we thinking? Because technically the brain belongs down here, and you know what's above that? Your heart. So the heart should have been guiding. Prayer should have been guiding. The Israelites were guided by God. They didn't have those other things happening for a while. They were guided by God. But at some point they said, hey, God, can we have a king? God goes, okay, I'll be your king. No, we want a human one. Oh, and God's like, I'm sorry for you. Yep, you want a king? Okay. In that moment, it meant that the people of Israel were letting go of their direct connection with God as a guide, shutting down the heart and putting a ruler in charge, another chakra lower, a ruler, a king, to decide things. And it didn't go very well. When King David came along, the one that was there tried to kill him constantly because David was like, let's get back to God being our guide. Oh, no, we can't have that. You see? So, in the context of prayer and so forth, the positive thinking versus prayer, we have to understand this. Every thought, not just every word, every thought and word you have is a prayer because it is a creative speaking forth. Even if it's just a thought, you're always praying because you're always thinking or speaking. Even if we take vows of silence, the mind is still working. It can say, I wish this, I want that, if only, or it can surrender and pray to God. But we're always praying. It's a metaphor because prayer means I'm asking for something, right? Generally speaking. Prayer, the word actually means to trap God, to capture God in the moment. It's to pull God down to this moment. That's what prayer actually translates to be. To capture God and pull it to the moment. I need some help, God. So it means you've dialed the bat phone and God's picking up. You connected, okay? That's what it's supposed to mean. So, but on a bigger level, we don't just pray when we're talking to God. But this is what people thought they could compartmentalize into prayer. So human beings are saying, okay, whenever I need God, I'll pray. That's like saying, God, I won't be needing you until I call upon you. Do you get what I just said there? We compartmentalized it and called it prayer. We gave it a word and a little, symbol of a ceremony where we kneel. It's metaphorical. I mean, we don't always do that anymore, but people kneel and they put their hands, they clasp their hands and they pray to God. But it's kind of like saying, but please don't listen to any of my other thoughts or comments. That's how disturbed we are. And God's saying, it doesn't work like that. Yes, it does, because I've heard somebody prayed and they got cured of a disease. The prayer became the convenient symbol, but it's when a person put their consciousness into something, it changed it. You can put your consciousness into anything and alter it. But I'm asking, did you do it with God or on your own? If it's on your own, it's not sublime in nature. It's not supernatural. You've simply manipulated something in this world. So, when I kneel, when I pray, it's like saying, this is a good thing. Because when I pray, God only sees my best side. You see what I mean by that? Okay, God, you can look now. Oh, Lord Jesus, baby Jesus, whatever. But we're always connected with God on some level. We don't always know it, but we're always connected because we're part of God. So when we have disturbing thoughts and words, it's watching, it's getting it. But God doesn't say, well, since you're on your knees and hands clasped and you said Jesus, you get to have what you want. It's saying you'll receive the things you most ask for, pray for. Oh, so then when I kneel and I ask for something, no. What is most on your mind all the time? The meter is always running. So are you mostly worried? Those are prayers. I'm just unlovable. I'm unlovable is a prayer. But I never think that you do. Where? Not just in your thoughts, in your beliefs. So Beliefs are deep inside, and generally people do not see beliefs. They can see thoughts because they rise in the mind. They can see feelings, emotions, because those percolate up. They can see physical manifestations because they're showing us right in our face. Is that making sense? Where are your beliefs? Anybody know? The beliefs are so hidden you can't see them until they surface on one of those other levels. Meaning, what goes on in my heart is hidden until it reaches a lower chakra and begins to manifest for me to see it. If I like what I see, I go, oh, look at me. Generally not credit to God, most people. Or if I don't like what I see, becomes my conversation with God. Hey God, I don't like what I'm seeing. Then something goes well and we go, oh, look at me. That's generally how people live. We have to understand. My beliefs are leaking through. When I see something physical in my life that I don't like, it's a manifestation of my beliefs. When I think thoughts that I don't like thinking, they're coming from my beliefs. When I have emotions that I don't like, they're coming from my beliefs. It's all coming from my beliefs, not from my thoughts. My thoughts are only the neurological manifestations. That's all it is. They're the apparent images in my lower mind. Guys, you have a higher mind than your lower mind, one that's higher than your lower mind. The heart center. The heart center isn't your highest self, which is the capital S God self. The heart center is where the soul resides. It's the spark, not the initial fire. But it is higher than the rest of me. So when we're on the spiritual path, stop trying to fix things on a lower nature with a lower nature. Or if you do, at least call it for what it is. But being on the spiritual path for most people means I'm going to go from wrestling with stuff in this world, the lower three chakras, my physical, emotional, and intellectual self, fighting with the world. I'm going to start fighting it with better things. That's most people's spiritual path, believe it or not. And it's not spiritual at all. It's just fighting stuff with stuff. The next level up is my heart gets engaged and it starts becoming my power over those other worlds. That's fantastic. There's one higher. God becomes my guide and my teacher and my healer. You see the difference of those? Human working human, soul working human, God working human. The God part is the best choice. But we often have forgotten how to do that. So let me summarize a couple of things. First, if you want to start bringing prayer back into the picture, we open the heart. It's humility. But we open the heart and stop trying to deal human against human. Get to the heart. Practice things like praise. Praise means I'm going to be in a state of humility. God, you know, and I do not. And see, positive thinkers go, oh, we're not supposed to say the word not. And we're not supposed to demean ourselves and say, I don't know. No, positive thinking, I know everything, I am God. And God says, I'm sorry for you. Because with that will come manifestations that will tear you down, rip you apart. Because your soul knows that was an arrogant statement that you allowed your ego to blurt out. And now it will manifest things to teach you humility. So praise is an important piece. Another one is part of prayer. I'm going to just talk real quick about the things we can use to kind of help with prayer. There's request type of prayers. There's praise prayers, which is great. You're not praising something outside. You're praising God that's also within, but not myself, my ego self. It's God within. But there's also request prayers like, God, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I'm struggling with. It's okay. It's not a bad thing for you to say, I'm struggling. I don't suggest only having these prayers of begging that you want your life always fixed. Pray to commune with God, and then life starts to turn around. Because in God, there's no poverty. So instead of praying for another check to arrive in the mail, pray to commune with God. God is abundance, and how could you have a check you can't pay, a bill you can't pay, if you're one with God? Pray to commune and connect with God, and the rest happens. That's what it means. Seek first the consciousness of God, and everything else will come. That's what that means. So a third type of prayer, forgiveness prayers. And people assume that means, okay, fine. Now what he means is I got to think of somebody I don't like and forgive them. No, forgive everything. When you have a bill that you think you can't pay, forgive the bill, but forgive that you believed you couldn't pay it. because it's not true. Forgive means to release it. So release the belief that it had power over you. I mean, you're a child of God, made in the image of God, and you're like having anxiety attacks because of this bill. It's a piece of paper. Like, it's a Post-it. Oh my God, the bill collector called. It's on a Post-it. It's real. Look how thin it is. It's just thin, paper thin, literally. And it can burn, it can crumple, it can shred. Oh no, I can't even get up off the couch. The Post-it came today. Like, wow. This is typical of human beings. So forgiveness means, okay, I still can barely get up, but I can at least raise a voice, a thought to say, God, this is crazy. For a moment there, I was believing that a Post-it had power over me, which sounds ludicrous, but guess what? The fact that you feel anxiety because that Post-it was stuck there, that a call came today, you are saying it's your God. What do I mean by it's your God? Only God is powerful. When you think that the message that a bill collector called could upset you, it means you've made it into a God and had power over you. Thou shalt not have false gods didn't mean just statuary. It meant don't believe that anything but God has power. Not just power over you, power at all. All right. Denial prayers. Another type of prayers, denial. Affirmations are a form of prayer. You know what that means? Instead of I need, give me, it's I am, I have all that I need to deal with this issue. God's presence is here rather than God, please come here. It's affirmative statements of prayer. Denial prayers, as I just mentioned, those are trickier because people think denial just means when you refuse to accept something is happening. That's kind of a psychological denial. The real power, there's only one powerful form of denial. Pretending something's not happening is not a powerful form of denial. It's actually disempowering. The only true form of denial is to deny that anything has power over you or over God, and you're one with God. Deny that something has power over you, including my own thoughts and creations. That's why if I think a thought here for a second and I think, oh, I've got a doctor appointment. Oh, I just know he's going to find something horrible. Right now you can say, wait a minute. Not just I'm denying what the doctor says. That's denial, negative denial. He says you've got a such and such. No, I don't. I'm spiritual. Tap, tap, da, 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 da. See, it's gone. That's false denial. That's ego denial. The real denial would be, I was afraid to go to the doctor because they might find something. But that very thought is frightening and can have an effect. And if I let it run rampant, do you know what it'll do? It could manifest, right? So when you have such thoughts, catch them, give them to God, and deny their effects. Please remember that in your prayers. Deny the effects of any fear-based thought. Because even though they're fear-based and not real, because you've thought them, they can manifest. That's part of the illusion that we've set up. All right. Another form of prayer, communion. To me, that's when you're not trying to pray to something, but you let go and become something, part of God. In that, there's no meditator and there's no prayer. I am communing, which is prayer, meditation at the same time, and the labels disappear. Does that make sense? That's the highest form of prayer. Another form of prayer is gratitude prayers, of course. Guys, give thanks, constantly give thanks. Give thanks for what you learned from experiences. Don't give thanks for horrible experiences. Give thanks for what you learned from those experiences. Give thanks that God is. Don't give thanks that I hope God is. Hopeful prayers, give thanks. Give thanks for everything you see. Give thanks for, and some people, they say, I give thanks just that I even woke up today. At my age, I give thanks as soon as oh, wow, I'm still alive. That's okay. That's kind of fun and funny and all that. That's okay. But try to make it a little deeper. Give thanks when something you see evokes a feeling of love in any way. If it brings up a non-love, give thanks for what you can learn from that lesson. But when anything at all, not that you want to keep it shallow and ego-based, but if someone says, you look great today. Oh, Well, thank you. I just gave thanks. No, that was a conversational stroke. Giving thanks would be the fact that this person complimented me is a reflection of God's presence saying, you're doing all right. You make it deeper. Does that make sense? Yes. Make it a deeper thing to give thanks for. So those are the different forms of prayers in a nutshell. I think I named 7. Lastly, some tools that help us increase the power of our prayers. Yes, the power of mind helps us increase the potency of our prayers. But not just the power of our mind being the creator, the power of the mind to focus on God. The power of the mind to discipline our thoughts instead of going, okay, I'm gonna commune right now. Oh, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch. Okay, wait, I'm going to commune right now. Oh, so-and-so is going to call today. That's not the power of the mind. You have to discipline your mind. So focus is and focusing the mind is a very important tool for, in improving prayer or meditation, communion, whatever you want to call it. Another important thing is acceptance to increase the power of your prayers. Acceptance means I'm this or something better, as opposed to I want this, nothing but this, bring it now. It's very important to let go and let God. Put something out there and then let go and let God. Be persistent and consistent with your prayers, with your meditations, with any of your spiritual work. Consistency is important. I usually use the word consistence because trauma is very persistent about tearing us down. But healing is consistent, consistent. And if I am consistent with my healing work, it will override the persistent nagging of trauma to try to tear me down. And trauma it'll affect our emotional body and so on, our physical body and so on. Another important piece, and I'm almost done here, the I am presence. If you can remember when you pray, instead of I'm going to pray now, what's really happening is the little self is bowing, the ego self is bowing. I'm choosing to bow it to the earth to be nothing, and then I rise to join with you, God. So the lower 3 chakra self, the human self, bows itself. The soul rises to join with God that descends. Does that make sense? That's proper prayer. Here I am. Instead of not doing the bowing, the humility, and just coming from the other, it's going to be my head in there again. So it is I am, meaning the I am within me, chooses to allow the ego self to bow. I am choosing to rise to my soul and say, here I am, God. See, if I don't bow the ego self, my ego self is right here going, here I am, God, and it's gonna mess up and filter every thought I'm having in communion with God. Is that making sense too, right? It gets in the way because you have filters. Everybody's got filters. Helen Schuckman, she wrote, she channeled A Course in Miracles for Jesus. This is Jesus. He should be all powerful. Why didn't he just channel right through? He did. But why is it written in a Shakespearean pentameter or rhythm of writing? Because she was a Shakespeare fan. It's not like Jesus goes, oh, I can't even bother writing anything if it's not in Shakespearean pentameter. It wasn't Jesus, other than him honoring where she's at. So when you or I have pure light of God come through us, it still filters at some point. It filters that you're a male or you're a female, you've had children, you haven't had children. It's still going to filter. That's not a bad thing, but it can be. If your filters are greater, so great that it doesn't allow any light to come through, it doesn't really do us a lot of good. So when we pray, one of the things we're really learning to do, don't just keep praying for stuff. Pray to release your filters. Pray to get out of the way, because if you're out of the way, the ego self is out of the way and bows itself, we bow it, then when we rise, the light is more prevalent. Symbolically, when we bow the ego self in our humble forms of prayer and rise again, we automatically have a greater ability to bring through light, which means prosperity miracles, healing miracles. Keep the ego there and your odds are just far slimmer of anything leaking through. That's the whole point of what the ego is. Hi, I am your veil. I want to make sure light does not come through and shine into your life. Prayer is a form of punching holes in that veil so light starts to stream through. And even though I want all the light right now, it doesn't happen that way. You want more light? Yes, now, bring it. No, it's do some work and it punches a hole through. But that's so tedious. Well, then do more punching of the holes. What does that mean? Forgive this, forgive this. Bow here, surrender there. Humility, be open. All these things I'm describing punches holes. And at some point, the light beams through. And when you're really in your ego, you don't go, oh, instead you're like, like some vampire. The light comes through and it's annoying to our ego selves. I could be saying something here today and you're like, oh, that's annoying. And that's a symptom of that. The light coming through and the ego self going, oh, I hate that. Oh, but maybe you're going to say, maybe what I'm thinking is right. Yeah, because that's God. I hate that. That's just the ego self. So we learn, what's beautiful is we get to a point where the light comes through and it becomes so tasty, so irresistible that we realize we want nothing but that. And that's when you've tipped the scales on your spiritual path. That's when you've gone from being kind of a passive participant to it's all I want. That's it now. See, when there's one light, two lights beaming through those holes you punched, it could still be annoying. You still could believe the light's going to burn your skin. That's the ego self going, oh no, don't stand in the light. It'll burn you. Like a vampire kind of thing. It'll annoy you. It'll shine light. And another way the light shines through is this. When somebody says, you're an alcoholic. I am not. It's one of those moments. The light is trying to get through and you don't like what it's showing you. And I'm sorry, that's a really hard thing to hear. Or whatever addiction it happens to be. I know that's a drag and it's an inconvenience, but work on it. Let another hole punch and a hole punch and a hole punch and a book and a meditation, hole punch, and enough light starts to come through where you say, how did I ever waste time on anything else? Why, when the light is shining, would I want to go and get in a dark shadow? There's a point where it doesn't make sense to do anything but the light. And that's when you know you're done, you're on your way. When there's still a chance of you going, but I still like standing in some of my dark places, that's still not a state of letting go. You're still working your spiritual program, and that's better than complete darkness. So that's good. But I'm saying there's a point where we do our work and the choice to stand in the dark has pretty much faded and you just can't imagine anything but the light. You don't read this and dark stuff. You start to read things that feed your soul. You don't have conversations that are uplifting and ones that tear you down. You don't have relationships that are really wonderful and totally abusive. These start to fade and they make no sense anymore. And when you can say, because it just doesn't make sense, then you know you're on your way. Then you're like, fast track back to God. Because when there's a voice that still finds value in those other parts, you'll still stay a little stuck to them and make excuses for them. But that fades when you start to realize, man, this light just feels really good. I'm going to share a quote real quick. From A Course in Miracles, leaving the battleground, we are reminded that all we want is the peace of God. From the ego-free place of peace and love, we return our attention to the situation confronting us. Once more on the battleground, but now carrying the memory of our true goal, we shall inevitably recognize what we should do. And the answer will then flow through our minds in the form we need to hear. This means that another one of the aspects or perks of prayer, doing this kind of work, is that we get clearer guidance. Continuing here, and notice how it said, you're still on the battleground. It means that you're in a battleground on earth. It's like a battleground. It's a world of ego. When you do your spiritual awakening, you're still on the battleground, but now you understand the value of peace. Thus, when we feel indecisive or unsure of a situation, unknowing about what we are to do, we are asked to lift our mind's attention from the battleground, your focus on the lower three chakras, below, in which we believe we exist and where we continually seek and demand a bit of trifling advice about a problem of an instant's duration. And instead, we choose to rise up and put our consciousness here in the heart. Is that making sense? Don't try to get in the battleground and fix it with the weaponry of the battleground. Stop, like Krishna told Arjuna, stop, rise to another level of self, See, Krishna represented God. And he was speaking to Arjuna, the human self. And he said, Arjuna, stop with your conflict. Stop with your lack of peace. Right now, there's something that needs done. Get on your chariot, which is here, and control those horses and ride. It meant the lower centers. Get on your chariot. Get control of those horses, your lower self, and let's go. We need to move. Let God guide you. And Arjuna's going, but. Silence. Go. And that's what we're asked to do. That's the spiritual life. That's spiritual mastery. Center, focus, go. And doing everything, imagine doing everything with a greater sense of God's presence. Just because you do things with God's presence doesn't mean you talk softly all the time. Flowers in your hair and hi, sure, abuse me. That would be just fine because I'm so loving and forgiving. That's not God. God could say, really? Seriously? Don't even think about it. Not happening. Oh, well, you claim to be spiritual. Can I please take advantage of you? Give me more of your time. Give me more of your money. Give me more of your health. Give me more of your whatever, your boundaries. No, I'm good. Thank you. No, but if you're spiritual, you'll give and get, break yourself over my demands. I'm your mother, but I'm your partner. Mommy, all those are all still crying of the ego. When you center into God and say, only light matters. Are you the voice of light? Not literally, you can ask these people, unfortunately, but it's like that. Just ask. Does this feel like it's the loving presence of God? If it is, probably right to pursue that or align with that. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. It's not always easy to say no to the dictates of the ego. And it's not even easy to spot them all. But just get better at it. And if not now, then when? If not who, then, if not us, then who? Somebody's got to get this together at some point. Yeah. So let's start committing to living this life. The negative world, negative thinking, no, guys, no. Say no to it. Don't fight it or hate it. Say no because it's not God. It's not real. What about positive? Positive, let's say this. Don't become controlled by the positive thinking and new techniques to fix the world. Just use them on an as-needed basis as a reflection of the other choice you're going to make, which is God. Negative thinking, positive thinking, God thinking. What I'm going to do is not negative thinking. What I'm going to do is not even positive thinking. God thinking, which will guide me into positive thinking. You see how I did that? I didn't say positive thinking leads you to God because it usually will stay of itself. People that learn to positive think usually become addicted to it and never choose to go the next one. Go all the way to God and let God help you have positive thinking. Don't have positive thinking and make that your thing. No negative thinking, no positive thinking, God thinking. And then it becomes my prayer to only live the life of God, which doesn't mean meek and solemn. It means alive and masterfully. Let's take a few centering breaths. Tune in and breathe in anything that really made sense. You don't grab a part of it and make it into a religion called positive thinking. There's a truth in something that was said today. One piece or all the pieces. Go in and grab hold of that truth. It's not what Michael is saying. There's a vibe of God underneath it. Go find that. It's a feeling. A feeling of yes, a feeling of clarity, a feeling of love, expansiveness, or whatever it comes across as it comes across to you. But find it and breathe that in. It's like that love that just cannot be explained. It's a peace that can't be explained, that can't be denied. There's a vibration, an essence, a feeling, and it's God. And ideally, when we go into our lives, one of the best tools for increasing the power of our prayers is to become a living prayer ourselves. Become a living testament of God's presence. Live the prayer. Don't just have it in the morning before you get out of bed. Live it. When you go, if you're a doctor, do prayers before you see your clients. If you're the client, do prayer before you see the doctor. Ask that the doctor be guided, even if they don't know how to be. Be such a living testament of prayer, people will say, there's something about you. We're not doing it for ego strokes, but there's a day when there's something about you becomes a further inquiry into what is it about that person, meaning you? And then they start to seek God because you were such a testament of God. They want some of that. Today's next part of meditation is combining prayer with meditation. Just a few weeks ago, I used the same theme, but I'll play off of St. Patrick's prayer. Feel this from the heart. Hear this as though it's your own soul saying these words. The I am presence of God, our Father, Mother, God, is known in us as the Christ presence. The name of the I am presence of God in me is called Christ. So I call upon that presence. The I am presence of God in me, I call upon Christ, and I call you forward. I choose to live, think, be, feel you as my consciousness. I know and affirm that I'm calling forth the presence of God to guide me, the might of God to uphold me, the wisdom of God to teach me, the eye of God to watch over me. This is the living presence of Christ. The word of God to give me speech, the way of God to go before me, the shield of God to shelter me. I choose the presence of God as my banker, as my partner, my counselor. Christ is with me. Christ before me, Christ within me. Christ at my right, Christ at my left. Christ within, so Christ without. I am the living Christ. Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks about me. Christ in the mouth of everyone that speaks to me. Christ in every word I speak, in every thought I have. Christ in every eye that looks upon me, and Christ in my eyes when I look upon others. Christ in all. Christ in me gives me the power to properly forgive, to truly forgive. Christ in me gives me the power to endure the stuff of this world. As Christ, I'm immune to illusions. And God is only love. So anything that seems unlike love would not harm me because it has no power. I am as God created me. I choose and will to be the Christ on earth. I am the presence of God. Christ in all. And then all the words fall away. And we spend our last minute just imagining being the Christ presence, communing with God, as though the child of God has returned home. There's no one from the other anymore. We return home and we disappear, in a positive sense, we disappear as the light. We disappear into the light. We spread and become one with that very light that God is. Feel the power of that light. Feel the power. It's my immunity. Even in the battleground, this presence of God says, I've got you. I've got your back. Choose only love, for that is what you are. Feel that presence disappearing into God. And in this I am strengthened. There's no illness in God, therefore there's none in me. There's no lack in God, therefore there's none in me. There's no gossip, hurt, and hate in God, therefore there's none in me. There's no drama in God, therefore there's none in me. Know this, I am that I am. And so it is. Gently, gently come back from that. Make sure you keep a sense of it so that it's not gone when you open your eyes. Keep a sense of it. It's there. I stay connected to that. Okay. Thank you, guys.